I'm Kiyan.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast where we impersonate the ruler of a galactic empire.
By wearing a robe. Because he's completely nondescript, other than his robe.
The only way you can identify him is by the robe. So, the Daleks Master Plan, or the first 6 episodes of the Daleks Master Plan.
Yes, because if you didn't listen to last week's episode, we were splitting this 12-episode serial up into 2 podcasts, because 12 episodes is just way too much to watch in 1 week.
Overkill. Anyway.
So, continuing on from Mission to the Unknown, which was that 1-episode serial 2 serials ago.
We went on a long tangent about the Dalek timeline, if you remember that.
Which we hopefully won't get into this time, because it's very confusing and melts brains everywhere. And just why? Why? It doesn't make sense.
So the serial picks up from the end of The Mythmakers with Stephen dying in the TARDIS and Katarina being
Ancient Trojan.
and not understanding what's happening, of course.
Yes, she thinks she's going off to heaven with Zeus.
Mm-hmm.
But she's wrong. She's actually going into
Space.
space, yes.
So the TARDIS lands on the planet Kemble.
Which is where Corey, Garvey, and what's-his-face all died earlier.
Right.
Which, at this point, I was like, wait, this is kind of weird, because at the end of Galaxy 4, Vicky looked out of the TARDIS and she's like, I wonder what's happening on that planet, signifying Kemble. So obviously the TARDIS was above Kemble, and then they went to ancient Greece. But now they're back on Kemble, which I thought was kind of weird. I mean, it makes sense, but I just thought it was kind of weird that they'd be there, they'd go to ancient Greece, and then they'd just come back.
Well, they came back later than they left.
Yeah, they came back later than they left, but yeah. Not much later.
Well, later enough that the Space Security Service or whatever had sent more ships to investigate the Corey missing crew of that ship.
Which is actually where this serial starts. So,
yeah. Brett and Kurt are in the forest.
And they've been trying to look for signs of the previous expedition, but Kurt is injured, and he's telling Brett to go on without him as they make their way through the jungle. And first Brett is reluctant to do so, but eventually he decides it's for the best, and he does.
And then Kurt dies. The Daleks show up and eliminate him.
Yep.
They exterminate him.
Literally right after Brett leaves. Right after he could have saved him. But yeah, first death of this serial. And more to come. More to come.
A lot more to come. So, then we see Marvik Chen explaining he's going on a holiday. And everyone's like, why is he going on a holiday? But that's not explained for another episode still. And then we cut back, and the Doctor has left the TARDIS and told Katarina to stay inside because he wants to go find medicine for Stephen.
So he makes his way through the jungle, and he runs into Kurt, who decides to steal the doctor's...
No, he runs into Brett.
Right, Brett, my bad.
Kurt died.
Yeah, Kurt died. My bad. He runs into Brett, who decides to steal his TARDIS key so he can get into the TARDIS, which he does.
And then Katarina's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, the old man sent me. And she's like, oh, okay. And he's like, yep, no. Does anybody know how to fly this thing? She's like, no, only the Doctor knows. It's his ship. So he's like, wow, it really is a marvelous ship. He wasn't lying.
And meanwhile, the Doctor is really pissed because someone just stole his TARDIS. So he makes his way quickly back to the TARDIS and realizes that Brett left the key in the door.
Nice.
So he gets back into the TARDIS, obviously, and
at this point, Stephen's already somehow stood up and knocked out Brett.
And they strap him down to a chair.
Right.
And then the Doctor goes back out to get the medicine that he was trying to get before. And while out in the jungle, he runs into some Daleks. He's like, "Whoa, what are you guys doing here?"
Uh-oh.
So
Uh-oh.
So he starts running back towards the TARDIS to alert everyone. But in the meanwhile, Brett has given Katarina some... Well, he's told Katarina to take some medicine from his pocket to give to Steven.
Right, because the Doctor put Brett into some sort of magnetic chair that holds him immobile through magic science.
The first of several magnetic force fields in this serial.
And so he gives Katarina the thingy, the tablet, and she's like, "What's a tablet?" And he's like, "Oh my gosh, just give it to that guy." And she's like, "Okay." And then they leave the TARDIS.
And yeah, Steven actually gets healed. And
Surprisingly.
stuff. Yeah. They are in 4,000. Super medicine. But they still use tapes, as we're going to see.
That's true. So the Doctor's worried about the Daleks, and he's like, "Why are you guys out of the TARDIS? What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, the Daleks showed up." And he's like, "Oh no, better go to the city, because that's the last place they'd expect us."
But it turns out the Daleks are also in control of the city. So,
while this is all going on, we keep seeing shots of the meeting at the city, or between Mavic Chen and Zephon.
right, who are two members of the Daleks' newly formed Galactic Council, which they formed in Mission to the Unknown.
Right.
And Zephon and Mavic Chen kind of hate each other.
Yeah, they both see the other one as a threat to their power, and they don't like each other, and they want to kill each other, probably. So, the Doctor and Co. are in the city.
And they decide to take one of the spaceships in the landing bay. Well, first they run into Zephon, who's by himself, because the meeting between the Daleks and the other races has already started, and then Zephon, just to show off his power to Mavic Chen, is like, "I'll go to the meeting when I want." So he starts wandering around the halls, and he runs into the Doctor and everyone, and they knock him out.
Yep.
And the Doctor tells Steven, Brett, and Katarina to go steal a ship while he puts on Zephon's robe and sits in on the council meeting to find out
Right.
what the Daleks are up to.
So, he does, and they go steal the ship, and then in the meeting, well, first the Daleks like, "Where is Zephon?" And then they go find him, like, "Zephon, come with us. We will start the meeting now." So he goes to the meeting as Zephon, the Doctor that is, and at the meeting, Mavic Chen is like, "Here's the core to the Time Destructor. It's solid block of terranium that took 50 years to mine." And then they find Zephon's body, and the alarm goes off.
Right. Apparently their plan involves compressing time or something. Destroying stuff.
We don't know what it
We
does.
don't
It's just
really-
called the Time Destructor.
Right. It just does something bad. Presumably.
Presumably.
And it's powered by the Terranium core, which Mavic Chen supplied, which is apparently the most rare metal.
And then, in the
solar
brilliant show of intelligence, when the alarm goes off, he leaves it on the table, and the Doctor just takes it and walks away.
They jack the spaceship and leave!
With the terranium! And the Dalek's like, "Where is the terranium? This is a plot by you, Mavic Chen, isn't it?" And he's like, "What? No, why would I do this? It must be you then, Zephon." And Zephon dies.
Nice going, Mavic Chen. Was able to turn the blame on Zephon just by saying it was Zephon.
Yep. So he's dead.
Yep. And there's way more to come. Way more deaths to come.
Yeah, a lot happened in just 6 episodes, now that I think about it.
Yeah, to be honest, even though this is a 12-episode serial, I've been pretty okay with it so far because it's pretty fast moving, pretty
Yeah.
fast paced.
It's moving pretty quickly.
I'm enjoying it so far. It doesn't feel like they've wasted any episodes on long, drawn out things that could have been compressed, which is a good thing.
Right.
So at that point, the Doctor and everyone else is in the ship, and the Daleks don't want to shoot them down because they've
got the Terranium.
Right, they've got the Terranium. And so they decide to remotely control their ship and have them crash land on this nearby planet, which is, I guess, a prison colony?
Yeah. And somehow, whatchamacallit, Brett regains control of the ship and lands it safely. This is actually episode 3 at this point.
Yeah. We forgot to mention, but... So, they're on this planet, and these 3 convicts see them land, so they decide to go jack their ship.
But one of them is too scared, so he runs away.
Right. Kirkson, the guy who's too scared, runs away. So
yeah, at this point, the Doctor's like, well, hurry up and get the ship repaired. Katarina, you take that cord and plug it in over there. And she's like, okay. And then he, dumps it outside. He's like, that should keep anybody away. And then the 2 hijackers, move towards the ladder, and then the Doctor's like, quick, turn it on. So she does, and it shocks them. And then she's like, ah! And then the Doctor gives this speech about how he doesn't want to kill anybody, and that'll just knock them out for a bit.
And Brett's like, yo, can't get anywhere without being that nice, or you can't get anywhere by being that nice.
Oh, yeah.
But so they're about to leave, because apparently they've repaired the ship. But then Kirkson gets on board and holds Katarina at knife point.
Yeah.
And asks them to take him to,
Back to Kemble.
And everyone's like, whoa, okay, man.
So in episode 4, they pretend like they're gonna go to Kemble, but then Kirkson goes insane and takes Katarina into the airlock with him, and then Katarina pushes the button and they fly out into space and Katarina dies.
Yep, first death of a companion.
She only lasted 4 episodes.
Yeah. And then the Doctor gives her more of a farewell speech than he does to Vicky.
Yeah. There's this whole... She was just doing what she knew how to do. She was saving all of us.
And then Ian's like, no, I think she just pressed it by accident. Steven.
Ian shows up. No, Ian, no. Hi, guys. She just pushed it by accident.
No, Steven says that.
We used the Dalek time machine to show up here again, Doctor. How's it going?
Right, the one that blew up.
Hey, maybe they made a side trip before going back to 65.
Steal thousands of Dalek time machines.
No, Steven's like, yeah, she just did it by accident.
So, yeah. Apparently, the writers decided to write out Katarina because they were running into challenges with her character because she didn't know anything, basically. And I guess they were having trouble writing
Makes sense.
that kind of character, which does make sense. And I also read that since this was the first death of a companion, they decided to do it in the most dramatic way possible.
Yeah.
Which they got that down.
Maybe overly dramatic in some aspects.
Yeah. But Katarina retrospective? I don't know.
She had 4 episodes and all of them were in this serial.
And she didn't do anything, really. She was kind of just there. So, gotta say, most useless companion so far.
Comparable to Barbara's first 4 episodes.
Yeah, actually.
But she probably wouldn't... Katarina probably had less to go anywhere. From here. Like, she didn't know anything. So she had less to work with.
And I think she even did less than Barbara. Because she
Probably.
barely contributed to any conversations, to be honest.
Well, she didn't really know what they were talking about, so she was just like,
This is
okay.
true, which is why they wrote her out, so...
Oh,
Farewell,
well.
Katarina. You will be missed. You're
Not
right
really.
out. What? Well, yeah, not really.
There's always going to be that one fan that's like, yeah, Katarina was the best companion. And everyone will just look at him and be like, you do know there were like 80 other episodes of the first Doctor that have better companions than that, right?
And he's like, yeah, go Katarina. But no, actually, I like to write out more than Vicky's.
Well, yeah, because the Doctor gave her such a farewell.
And honestly, dying is a better way to get written out than, oh look, I'm just going to stay in ancient Greece because true love, and there's my cousin.
Well, I don't know,
on
it
a
worked for
horse.
Susan.
It worked more for Susan because there was
She had a reason to leave.
right, and there was this
Vicky didn't.
subplot leading up to it rather than, oh look, I'm in love, one episode later.
There was no subplot leading up to Katarina just going, nope! Space!
It was dramatic and cool.
I feel like they knew they were going to write her out as soon as she stepped onto the TARDIS, because her first line inside the TARDIS is, they told me I was going to die.
Yeah, they probably knew.
Oh well.
But there goes her.
For the first death of a companion, I don't feel anything.
Because she was only here for 4 episodes.
Yeah, I wasn't attached to her. I laughed at how absurd it was.
I thought it was pretty dark, actually. Like, that's
Yeah,
a
it
terrible
was,
way to die.
But it was so
Get
unexpected.
sucked out of an
It was so
airplane.
unexpected.
It
You would
was.
never think a girl from Troy would fly out into space and die in the year 4000.
Well, when you put it that way, it just sounds ridiculous.
Exactly.
But we forgot to mention that Kirkson also dies.
True.
Because he's in the
He kind of
Galactic.
deserved that.
You know what? I feel worse for Kirkson than I do for Katarina. No.
Well, he was a prisoner on the prison planet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if he deserved it or not. We only met him for 5 minutes. Well, it was probably more than 5 minutes, but it felt like 5 minutes.
But yeah, after that, the Doctor, Steven, and Brett decide to head back to Earth to notify the Space Security Service or whatever.
Yeah, they're
they're
going to
called.
talk to Daxter.
Right.
Brett's friend.
Right. They're going to talk to Daxter about the conspiracy by Mavic Chen.
Right. So the Daleks are like, wow, Daleks, you failed. Exterminate all of you. They just kill off a Dalek invasion of force off screen. It mentions in the wiki that the Dalek Supreme orders the pursuit who failed to be killed, which he does that again later in the serial. He just kills off hundreds of his own troops.
Yep.
But that's off screen, so we don't count that.
So Mavic Chen has somehow made it back to Earth before the Doctor and everyone.
Which doesn't even make sense.
Well, it kind of does. They
His ship
spent
would have to
some
be
time-
faster than the Doctor's. Because the Doctor's flying in Mavic Chen's ship, remember? And it's like a space cruiser. The Spot.
Yeah, but
and
they waste time on that prison planet.
yeah,
whereas
but
Mavic
Mavic Chen doesn't leave till after that prison planet scene. Because he's with the Daleks when they tell him that they failed to capture them on the prison planet.
I guess. So, yeah, he does make it back to Earth before that, though, so I don't know what happened there.
Warp drive. Mr. Sulu laying a course for Earth. But so he gets home, and it turns out it's more than just him in on the conspiracy.
Right, there's this guy named... What was his name? The bald guy? What was his name?
Carlton?
Carlton? Was he ever named?
Chen conspires with the head of the security service, Carlton, on his worries with regard to the Terranium.
Okay, so I guess it's Carlton. But, yeah, he's in on it too. And who knows how many other people. But,
Yeah.
But Carlton is kind of conspiring behind the scenes to usurp Mavic Chen's position once he...
Or at least that's implied.
Yeah,
We don't know yet. Presumably that's how it's going to go.
right. So Mavic Chen orders... Because he thinks it's Brett and Kurt who have hijacked his ship. So he orders the rest of the security police to kill them.
Right, and he tells the girl, Sarah, like, about the stolen terranium. Like, the true reason why he wants the traitors to be killed. Like, he doesn't tell the rest of the force, but he tells Sarah.
Yeah, and she goes off to try and find the quote-unquote traitors. And at that point, the Doctor, Steven, and Brett have made their way back to Earth.
Or the experimental ship or whatever they landed on.
So Brett calls up Daxter, his friend, to explain the situation, and they do, but they leave out the part about the terranium, and then Daxter mentions the terranium to them.
And then the Doctor's like, so you're in on this too, aren't you? And he's like, what? No, I don't know anything. He's like, I never mentioned the terranium. And then Daxter's like, Brett, you couldn't believe this, man. You must have heard him say the terranium. He's like, how did you know about the terranium, Daxter? And he's like, what are you doing? And then Brett just shoots him.
Yep. Brett just out of nowhere kills him.
And the Doctor's like, you know how I feel about killing people.
And then Brett's like, he was a traitor. It had to have been done.
And they're like, come, we have to get out of here. No one's safe here. And then they leave, and then Sarah shows up, and Brett makes a distraction or something.
Allowing the Doctor and Steven to run away. He talks to Sarah for a few moments, and then Sarah kills him.
Yeah. Brett and Daxter die.
Within minutes of each other. Within minutes of returning to Earth or the satellite or whatever they are, wherever they are. Yeah.
So now episode 5.
Tons of deaths. Yes, episode 5. What? What was wrong with episode 5?
Just the scene where they get transported. So they go to this room and they're examining this. The Doctor and Steven are examining this case thing, and there's a mouse in it. Spider just crawled down from the roof. So Steven and the Doctor are examining the case, and there's a mouse in it, and the Doctor's like, must be some sort of experiment. And then Sarah shows up and is like, all right, hand over the terranium. And the Doctor's like, no. And then the door closes, and then
some episode 1 stuff goes down. There's this weird inverted scene with them screaming in agony, but the Doctor looked really happy.
And then we see Carlton talking to some guy, and he's like, what was going on in that room? And he's like, oh, a test in molecular dissemination.
We were trying to send mice halfway across the galaxy.
To the planet Myra. And he's like, well, will they survive? And he's like, I don't know, we've never sent humans before.
And he's like, stop the experiment, stop it right now. And they're like, nope.
It's too late, it's already been done. And then he's like, don't worry, it should start transmitting when they get to Myra, which is several light years away. And
So
then it
Carl-
defies all physics.
Yeah, Dylan was kind of upset about how this breaks all known laws of physics when we were watching. But
The transmission on Myra is immediately received by the station, but Myra is light years away. The fastest the transmission can travel is at the speed of light, which means it would take years for the transmission to get from Myra to the space station.
well, all I have to say about that is it's a show about a time-traveling police box. A lot of the fake science hasn't made sense. So I'm not too bothered by it. But
It's just because we just learned that in physics. It was on my brain.
either way, they end up on Myra.
And they survived. Luckily.
Yep. And Steven and the Doctor come to before Sarah, and
So they
Steven
take a
takes her gun. And then Sarah wakes up, and they get to talking about how she just killed Brett, and she reveals that Brett was her brother.
Well, she's saying all these things like she didn't really care. And she's like, yeah, he was a traitor. And then she's like, he was my brother. And I'm just like, well, that doesn't make it any better.
Well, what I thought she meant by that was she was less easy on him being a traitor, even though he wasn't, because she was her brother. Because, like, you know how if someone does something bad, you're like, well, that's pretty bad, but, like, you don't really care. But then if someone in your family does it, you're actually invested in it and you actually care. So I feel like she was just harder on Brett because of that, but she didn't have to kill him.
Yeah.
And at this point,
you wouldn't kill your family members.
At this point, I was like, what's wrong with this family that they're so willing to kill people? It's like Brett killed Daxter. And then Sarah immediately killed Brett without any warning.
Yeah, and Brett just wanted to kill Kirkson and Katarina.
Yeah.
He just wanted to open the airlock and let them out, even though Katarina does that anyway.
So, the Doctor reveals that he knows about Myra, and that there's this species there called the Vizians, which are 8-foot-tall, savage, invisible creatures. Really overpowered. But back with Mavic Chen and Carlton, Mavic Chen is like, damn, they're on Myra, what are we gonna do now? And then Carlton suggests telling the Daleks that Mavic Chen sent them there on purpose, because Myra's pretty close to Kemble.
Right.
And it would be easier for the Daleks to just go there, get the Terranium, and then get back to Kemble.
By the way, during this whole adventure, the TARDIS is still sitting on Kemble.
Yep.
Just in case anyone's confused.
Yep, they haven't been using the TARDIS at all. It is still right where it landed on Kemble. And how they get back to it is anyone's guess at this point. Well,
Although it happens in
it
episode
happens
6.
in the next episode. But at this point, they're on Myra without any way to get off.
Right. So, the Doctor and Sarah are, walking around, and Steven, they're walking around, and then the Daleks show up. And, you're surrounded. And they're like, well, it appears, my friends, the Daleks have won.
Well, first the Daleks kill a couple Vizians.
No, they kill the Vizians afterwards because that creates a distraction for the Doctor to escape.
No, they land, kill the Vizians, then they meet the Doctor. Then they fight the Vizians, but it doesn't show any specific inverted death scenes.
Jeez. Something like that. But in the beginning of episode 6, they escape anyway. And steal the Dalek ship.
Right. Thanks, Vizians. You made a great distraction.
And then
what I thought was that they just made the Vizians invisible because they didn't have the budget to create another alien race.
Probably. I mean, I'm guessing they blew their entire budget on this 12-episode serial, and the next 4-episode serials are all gonna not have great special effects.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe there'll be
Well, they spread it out equally by episode. That they gave each episode a certain budget, and just, I don't know, for this episode they didn't have enough for months. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. We'll see eventually.
There's only 2 historical serials in this season left. I think all the rest of them aren't.
Well, there's only 4 left. No,
there's a couple in the Second Doctor's era, but they're not solely historical. Anyway,
oh right, the Second Doctor goes into
Scotland. The
No,
Highlanders.
I was gonna say that season 4 contains both First and Second Doctor.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, but either way, they steal the Daleks' ship and make their way back to Kemble, to get back to the TARDIS. And the Daleks smartly only had one Dalek guarding the ship.
Yeah, and Steven just puts mud on his eye, and they get in the ship, and they escape.
Yep.
And then the Dalek Supreme is like, well, they failed. Killed him off.
So, once in space, the Daleks try and remotely control their ship again.
But
to send it back to Kemble.
Steven just tears out the control device thing.
Yeah.
But they go to Kemble anyway.
Then they use the they realize that their way of controlling the ship is now null, so they just use this giant magnet beam or whatever.
Yeah. And there's another magnetic force field in this episode, because while they're on the ship, the Doctor decides he should make a replica of the Terranium to give to the Daleks.
Right, to use as bargaining material so they can bring him back to the TARDIS.
Right,
because they're
he makes a pretty good copy. I don't know what out of.
Yeah.
But he needs to power it up for some reason. So Steven suggests using the gravitational power of the ship's core.
Something like that. He suggests using the power of the magnet that's pulling them in to power up the Terranium.
Something like that. And then Sarah's like, you don't know anything. You're from 1,000 years in the past. Which is the first time Steven's not been the one who knows everything.
Yeah. So he's like, I'll show you, and he does it anyway, and like gets knocked out.
And then he wakes up and he's surrounded by a force field. He can't move. Like, nice going, Steven.
But it works. It powers up the Terranium.
The Doctor supports Oculus. Oculus.
Right, every time they look at the Terranium outside of its casing, they have to wear these special goggles or headgear or whatever it is.
They look like the Oculus Rift. Doctor supports Oculus.
So eventually they get drawn back into Kemble by the giant magnet. And, or the tractor beam.
So the Doctor has this insane plan that the audience doesn't know about, but Sarah's like, that's never gonna work. Brett and Sarah seem to share the fact that they don't believe the Doctor's plans will work.
You know, I kind of agree with them if I had just heard one of the Doctor's plans for the first time. Because they usually sound like they won't work. And they usually do. Often not in the way the Doctor was envisioning.
Well, this time it did.
This time it worked perfectly.
So the Doctor's like, we'll give you the Terranium in front of my ship. So the Daleks are like, okay.
Well, at first the Daleks don't want to, but then Mavic Chen convinces them to do it because he just wants the Terranium.
Right, so they go to the ship, and the Doctor's like, my friend here will give you the Terranium as soon as my other friend and I are inside the ship. So him and Sarah go inside the TARDIS.
Steven comes out with the Terranium, hands it over, and as he's getting back into the TARDIS, the Daleks shoot him, but they end up just destroying the force field.
Steven.
Steven is unharmed, and they make their way back into the TARDIS and leave.
And the Daleks are confused. And that's the end of episode 6.
Well, other than that scene where the Doctor's like, the air outside is very dangerous. Why, you ask? Because it's dangerous. And then it ends.
Yeah, because the TARDIS breaks down at the end. I mean, no surprise there, but the scanner stops working and the time rotor stops going up and down.
Right. And that's where we're leaving off this serial for this week.
My prediction is they gave the Daleks the real Terranium and not the fake Terranium.
Well, there would be no way to differentiate between the two now that they're both powered up. Whatever that means.
Well, they didn't confirm at the end that the Doctor had the correct Terranium. He just asked Sarah where it was, and she's like, oh, over here by the console.
Well, hopefully they have the correct Terranium.
Well, you already know what happens, so...
I don't know what happens for the next couple of episodes. I know what happens right at the end, because I accidentally spoiled it for myself! But, yeah, I don't know where they've landed, actually. My prediction, Skaro. Because...
Really, you think they went all the way back to the home of the Daleks?
They said that it's dangerous to go outside, which is true on Skaro.
It's also true on a lot of other planets.
It's true. That's true. But, I don't know.
I mean, on Skaro, the air wasn't dangerous to breathe. It was just highly irritated.
Yeah.
So I was pretty sad when Brett died, because I really wanted him to be a companion. But, oh well.
Yeah, at the beginning of this serial, I thought Brett was going to be a new companion.
To replace Katarina that they killed off in episode 4.
Right.
But
he's not.
That wasn't to be. Oh well.
Yeah, I kind of would have liked that, because even though he was kind of a jerk at times, he butted heads with the Doctor more than any other companion has, which would have been interesting.
Right. He was like Ian, but more.
Right.
Except Ian didn't die. So 3, 6, 9 people died in this serial. So far.
Yeah.
Still 6 episodes to go, remember that.
Yeah. As we were saying before, I've got to say this serial has been pretty good so far because of just how fast-paced it is, and...
They've crammed a lot into 6 episodes.
Yeah. It never felt like they were drawing it out at all.
And also, surprisingly, at the end of 6 episodes, I felt like that could have just been a complete serial. Like, I know the storyline's not resolved, but I feel like it ended in a place that it was good for us to say stop and make a podcast about it.
That's true.
If we had stopped at any of the other episodes, it would have been weird.
Yeah, that is true.
So that at least played well into the plans.
And I've got to say, with how many deaths there were in this serial and how, I guess, dramatic they were with people getting sucked out of airlocks and people shooting each other. I feel like for this serial, they kind of went for a more serious approach than what they've been doing before.
Well, yeah, because every time basically the Doctor sees someone die by like Brett's hand, he's like, I don't advocate killing Brett. It's not okay.
Yeah, it's taken on a more serious tone than previous serials have, which I guess works. I mean,
Yeah.
I liked what they were doing before too, where I feel like in most of the serials, they didn't go for either a comedic or serious approach. They just wrote it. They just wrote the serial.
Right.
Had set up a semi-dangerous setting for the Doctor and friends to get into. Had some comedic moments and some serious moments, and that worked out pretty well. But I feel like for this serial, they were specifically trying to make it more serious, which I was okay with. I mean, I like it so far.
I feel like at this point they knew they were probably going to write out the first Doctor at some point, and they wanted to give him some big, epic story.
Really? You thought that you think they knew they were going to write him out?
Well, just
in
by the
middle of
way
season 3?
the serial's been playing out, I feel like it's been designed to be the best of the first Doctor.
The first Doctor's biggest adventure or whatever.
Right.
That would make sense, but I don't know if they.
I mean, I don't know if they knew at that point, but it feels like it's been written to be the big adventure for the first Doctor. Like his greatest enemy with their greatest plan against the greatest man in the galaxy.
Well, yeah, that does bring up a good point, but maybe they only did that because they didn't know if they were going to get renewed.
Possibly.
Because at this point, I think with each season they didn't know if they were going to get renewed for another. So
Right.
So maybe they didn't know about the regeneration per se, but they also didn't know if they were going to get renewed for season 4. So they were like, okay, let's just put all we have into season 3.
Right. And I mean, last week we went into this going, oh geez, 12 episodes is going to be terrible, but it's actually really good so far.
Yeah, if it keeps up how it's been going so far, then
It might just be my favorite serial at the end, if they can keep it up.
yeah, I'd have to say so too. But we'll have to see how they. I
I mean, I wish we had not reconstructions.
Yeah.
And we could watch the actual footage, but we've only got 3 non-reconstructions in this serial. 2, 5, and 11, I think it was.
Yep.
But oh well.
Yeah. The reconstructions do have a bit of footage, I guess.
Surprisingly.
More than like the season 1 or 2 reconstructions have had.
Right.
But I guess that stands true for all the season 3 reconstructions so far.
Well, they probably, when they were destroying the episodes, they destroyed them in order from season 1 onward. So, I don't know.
Right, that would make sense.
I don't know. There's not much more we can say since we haven't finished the serial.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Email us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. No emails still. The inbox is empty. Well, it's not empty. There's still those 3 emails we've gotten from a long time ago now. If you're listening to this on the website, check us out on iTunes. Trust your doctor. Leave a rating on iTunes. Do some stuff. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your acquaintances, tell your neighbor.
Tell the Daleks.
Tell the Daleks. Tell your dead cat. Tell your friend who works at a major TV corporation. No, I don't know.
But yeah.
Next week
we continue with the Daleks Master Plan and see how it all resolves. But until then, the end.